Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again with the follow-up video on the Volkuur Cold Poison Assassin using Ice Shot and Barrage, as well as a Void Fletcher. And you can see the Void Fletcher going off in the background here, plenty of big explosions, which doesn't help too much during the clear. It's mostly for the single target, as I mentioned in the previous video. And you may have noticed that I don't have a Coralitos Flask anymore in this setup. That is one of the big changes that I actually made to the build, and it is to drop Coralitos Flask and pick up Perfect Agony. I did try it out, even though I was very hesitant to do it, because numbers-wise it just didn't make sense, and having to spec all the way over to Perfect Agony seemed very annoying, let's just say, on the passive tree. Overall, I think it works a lot better, because the idea of the build is to have all of your cold damage still kind of working, but then have a bunch of poison behind it when you need to have thicker, heavier damage. This is an example in my deepest delve at the moment, which is like 400 or so, and after making a few changes, it did actually work out pretty nicely, because initially I wasn't too happy with how the build was delving, but swapping out the Coralitos and going into Perfect Agony meant I was freezing a lot more often and hitting front-loaded shots a lot more often. I then took out Fork in my Ice Shot setup, and that meant my Ice Shot was hitting a lot harder while still using the Threshold Jewel for Pierce, meant that I'd hit a lot of enemies in large packs, and overall it does feel kind of worth it, because the question I was trying to answer was, is Volkuurs worth it? Should I ever use something like this over just plain initial hitting with Ice Shot, Barrage, that sort of thing? And overall it does feel kind of worth. You're still getting a lot of good front-loaded damage, but you still have a lot of poison up your sleeve when you really need it against the heavier single-target enemies, and you don't have to be up close and personal, because point blank isn't necessary in a build like this, so you can actually play a ranged character as it was designed, purely ranged, and still get a lot of damage in. And overall the character had a lot of damage for what it was wearing, which is a Death's Opus, couple of 6-links, so that's pretty much the requirements for getting your damage rolling. Some level 20 gems, filling out your passives, maybe a Dying Sun could be a little costly at certain times of a league, but I don't think it has the same requirement for a typical bow character, which really does need some fine-tuned gear to have good single target in the end game. Otherwise, you can make some good clearing bow characters without much investment, but to have actual good single target, typically you need a pretty finely tuned bow character. This one here has quite a lot of single target, and as I mentioned in the other video, it's really hard to tell what your single target's ever going to be, because it's based off of how many poisons you get on the enemy, how many wither stacks, if the enemy's alone, all kinds of random bullshit. But under the perfect circumstances, it actually has quite a lot of single target, and usually it only takes about one barrage volley sort of thing to take down an Uber Elder and shape a phase. So you run up, hit him once, move on, hit the other guy once, and I will show you that obviously in the end of the video for the Uber Elder run that I did for the character. But some examples here, I'm still using Coralitos Flask, some I've got no Coralitos Flask and just Perfect Agony. For single target, I honestly couldn't tell much of a difference. The idea though is that Coralitos does give you that poison duration in the end, which is basically all it does, just gives you another roughly 1 second on your 3-second poison, and it's kind of nice, but not having Coralitos is probably nicer, just because you can freeze things and you don't have to worry about your flask being up for really good damage. Did make a few other little changes to the passive tree as well, and I do want to go over those in just a second so that you can see exactly the changes I made to make the build what it is right now, because I think it turned out pretty well in the end, but it does take some trial and error to get to where you want. So to start with, I will show you the path of building. You can see I got 2.5 million barrage damage here. I'm assuming about 20 poisons on enemy recently and 20 on the enemy, which should easily just be one barrage volley, so it's a fair low-end estimate, and 2.5 million damage. If I have Coralitos up and I don't take perfect Agony, my poison damage is about 3 million. But you have to understand that all of that is coming in the duration part of the poison, which is on the back end. So you've got our current poison duration here at about let's say 2.6 seconds, while with a Coralitos it goes up to about 3.5 seconds or so. So it will actually impact your poison damage on some enemies that can last that long and you can stack up that much poison, but on most enemies you're fighting you won't actually notice the loss of this Coralitos at all, and it should just be pure profit because you gain damage from the barrage initial hitting, since it currently will do more damage with its hits, and the crit multi that you have on your build will actually apply, whereas Coralitos does remove that and becomes, well, less of an ice shot, less of a freezing build. You won't really be freezing too much, you won't be shattering too much. So something I did just notice is I also only have 90% chance to poison at the moment, so it seems like we do have to grab another 10% somewhere, maybe through the use of this, maybe just using a Herald of Agony, because with Coralitos it does give you a bit more chance to poison, and I currently don't have enough by the looks of it. Could use a Herald of Agony though. One other thing I did as well is anoint this thing here, Dire Torment. I think that's the best node for my build at the moment, though according to POB, Dirty Techniques will be the biggest damage node out there, but it is factoring in poison duration, which, as I said, I didn't really want too much of because I want to do my damage quickly, and just stacking duration and duration and duration isn't the way forward for the biggest poison damage out there, because not too many targets are going to last that long anyway, so it's kind of redundant to go for it. Besides that, have just gone over to Perfect Agony, so the tree was a little respect from up here. Since I already finished my gear off, I had to replace the int somewhere and got it here, and just tried to fill out life as much as I could, and that's the end passive tree, at least for my character. You can easily spec into more things like freedom of movement, fleet foot, full-blown phase acro if you want. It's pretty customizable, and I do encourage you guys to try out lots of different things out yourself if you're playing this type of build, because for example, I didn't know what I was doing with my ice shot for a long time. I ended up dropping any sort of utility or supports for clear on the ice shot, and it's all pure damage, so I put in Vile Toxins over Fork, and then it just ended up rolling with an Omen of the Winds full time, and it does Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. So we got that going, and just a bit of Pierce, no Fork anymore, but I do encourage you guys to try it out because it can be better in some situations, worse in others, but overall I think I like this setup a little more, just to have the big heavy hits most of the time, while the clear is just a little worse for some big open maps. But Fork, Chain, Pierces, I do encourage you guys to try plenty of that if you're building this sort of a character, because you may find a setup you like more than the one that I currently like, and it's entirely up to you at that point. Now, you can get a better bow than Death's Opus. You can craft one, an Elder Bow with a vicious projectile, for example. You can have a Darkscorn, shit like that, but Death's Opus just has nice synergy with Void Fletcher, and if you want to build around Void Fletcher to some extent like I have, then it's probably the way forward, and it's pretty easy to get. But this type of build can go plenty of different directions. It doesn't necessarily have to be cold, doesn't have to be Volkuurs, doesn't have to be poison. This is kind of a decent template just for a bow character in general, but I think the entire Volkuur thing worked out rather well, and I want to leave you guys with the Uber Elder kill video for the second time I killed him, I think, this time without a Coralitos. So thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. I can't burst him down in like one flask. Combo. That's kind of a problem. That looks pretty good. Yeah, it looks like I did a lot more damage with Void Fletcher as well, which is nice. And I don't have to worry about Coralitos for this stuff, so that's good. Perfect Agony's always up, and we actually freeze these things. Yeah,
my lady.
Maybe it's the way to go. He dodged all of them. Yeah, how about that? Yeah, he ticked over. Good. Farm Fresh, thanks for the 7 months. Not placing these totems very well right now. Pushed him over. Yep, pushed him over. Good. Oh, fuck off. He queued up slaps even though he's immune. Where I come from, we call that bullshit. Balls. Yeah, you can actually see the Void Fletcher damage. When I'm rolling, no Coralitos. Void Fletcher chunks health as well, which is decent. Yeah, it's probably the right move. Feels bad going there, but seems correct. Another jewel! Oh my god. And that again. Wait. What did I do with my wisdom scrolls? Good jewel? It might be. We're due for a good one! Double damage pride. That's it. Which is okay, but it's not like fucking Poggers or anything.